Part two, further traditional therapy shortcomings. I was clawing my way out of the dark with those half baked therapies, but before energy work kicked in, I was a wreck, shaking like a junkie in withdrawal, trapped in bed, too terrified to even glance at my damn phone, swallowed whole by a tidal wave of pure, unhinged panic. Yet, when I'd get right to the point where I couldn't live a second longer, the LCS would throw me a bone to nibble on to edge me along. A running theme you will see in the pages that follow. My old college roommate, Adam, called me up one day with a pitch. Hey, man, I founded a tech startup. I can't pay you yet, but if you help me with it, I have investors that are interested and we can make a shit ton of money, he said, knowing full well from previous conversations with me that I was in desperate need of more fulfilling work. It was a custom made hunting and fishing gear marketplace. Basically, Etsy meets Bass Pro Shop. Tacklebox was a brilliant idea, but it was run by two total amateurs. I was desperate for a distraction from the mind numbing grind of teaching fractions to kids on the spectrum. And with my grand total of zero startup experience and his desperate need for free labor, we shook hands on pure delusion. The following weeks, out of the blue, I landed a job selling digital marketing services for an ad agency based in Denver. I knew nothing about sales or digital marketing, but it was my ticket out of hell. A fresh start again. Moving to Denver felt like leaping off a cliff blindfolded. My dog Eddie stayed loyally by my side while I battled mental chaos and a paycheck that barely covered the city's high costs, leaving me with only about $1,000 saved each month. We projected Bass Pro Shops would acquire us to tap into a marketplace showcasing 600,000 plus hunting and fishing pros custom made gear, a coveted segment craving quality beyond mass production. With a 5-year exit, we figured we'd be valued at 85 to $100 million. I truly had no clue just how monumentally stupid and impossible that fantasy was. My therapist tried to warn me that it was paradoxically both catastrophically imprudent and absolutely essential. He agreed I needed some kind of purpose beyond debating on how many benzos to take to get my days over faster and rage posting in the antinatalist subreddit groups. And he also recognized that I had to flee my hometown before I finished the job of destroying whatever was left of my will to live. Yet here I was, planning to catapult myself into a foreign city where I'd known not a single soul, while juggling two remote jobs that exposed me as a complete fraud daily, and all with a brain that treated reality like it was a suggestion rather than a requirement. I was caught in an impossible equation: stay and deteriorate slowly, or leave and implode spectacularly, like being forced to choose between death by hanging or death by cliff diving. Man, can nothing in life be easy? I remembered yelling at my therapist on our weekly Zoom calls. He wasn't a bad therapist either. This guy was supposedly DBT royalty, ranked among the nation's elite, the kind of professional other therapists probably had posters of in their offices. I was burning through money I couldn't afford to lose week after week, praying he'd say something that wasn't already available in the comments section of my late night Reddit confessions to anonymous strangers who were probably just as broken as I was. But he never did. And honestly, even if he had discovered the perfect combination of words to fix me, I was already too far gone, like trying to perform CPR on someone who'd been dead for hours. And frankly, I was tired of him not knowing what it felt like to be me and me trying to live in his sanitized version of reality. That's the thing about trauma narratives. And this is where modern therapeutic practice gets dangerously muddled. You're caught in what I call the articulation paradox. You desperately want to speak to someone, anyone, about your pain, but every time you do so, you are literally reinforcing the very neural pathways that are destroying you from within. The universe, you see, operates as a feedback mechanism. What you focus on expands. What you resist persists. What you speak becomes your lived reality. And there's emerging research showing that repeatedly verbalizing traumatic events can actually worsen psychological outcomes by strengthening those pathological memory circuits. That means that talking about trauma can actually make you worse. Further research shows that when your entire identity becomes wrapped up in your traumatic experiences, when you become the person who was abused or the survivor, You're basically trapping yourself in a psychological prison of your own making. Your brain starts organizing everything around those horrible things that happen to you. And suddenly you can't see yourself as anything else. It becomes a story, an identity. It's a memory stored in your psyche, and it needs to be removed, alchemized, or not attached to, not incessantly talked about. Studies reveal that this narrative dominance actually prevents you from integrating trauma into a broader, more complete story of who you are, keeping you psychologically stuck and reinforcing the very negative self views that are destroying you. Yet the same research falls short in that complete story, since very few studies in modern psychology address your true nature. The only complete story that both actually matters and actually exists. It's not an illusion. Further chapters will give more detailed instructions on how to practically inch closer and closer to your true being or your true nature before eventually setting you free from the ego and suffering for good. So stick around for that. It's going to get great. Now, I recognize the psychological trap that befuddles damn near all trauma survivors, and I've walked through its deepest, most unspeakable hellscapes. I was once, not long after I returned from Korea, curled up in a dark closet, making animalistic sounds, wailing uncontrollably, with a long stream of snot connecting from my nose to my chest, and what would become the first of countless PTSD symptoms mixed with extreme medication side effects like tardive dyskinesia. The key lies in maintaining conscious control over how much we elaborate and refusing to let these experiences colonize our entire identity. Some studies reveal a more sophisticated psychological bind where both over processing and under processing trauma create distinct forms of mental imprisonment. Excessive elaboration crowns your trauma as the supreme ruler of your identity, while inadequate processing abandons you to fragmented, disorganized memories that research demonstrates worsen PTSD symptomology. The issue isn't simply whether you talk about trauma, it's how you talk about it. When your storytelling turns ruminative, repetitive, and identity defining instead of structured and integrated into the bigger picture of your life, it becomes a form of psychological self harm disguised as healing. You think you're working through it, but in reality, you're rehearsing your victim story until it's the only song you know how to sing. You're trapped between two equally terrible options: transform into a walking trigger warning who can't shut up about their damage, or turn into one of those aggressively positive people who's clearly dying inside, but insist everything is amazing. Given this complexity, it's easier said than done, especially at the beginning of the path or when you're in the thick of it, as I was. Like when you've just signed up for a mental hospital stay in a new city because you don't feel safe in your own body. The nurse asks if you have thoughts of harming yourself while you're wondering if existing itself counts as self harm. That's an actual question I asked a therapist during intake, by the way. Turns out it really is all mind in the end. At its core, it really is all mind. But part of the problem lies in how therapists, bound by limits of human consciousness, try to wrestle with the infinite complexity of your existence in mere 50-minute sessions. They rely on frameworks that fall painfully short. Remember the I think argument from earlier chapters? No single therapist, hell, not even the combined wisdom of every therapist, past, and present, and future, can truly grasp the countless variables shaping your unique psychological landscape, or keep pace with a field where today's breakthroughs become tomorrow's discarded theories. That is where high-level energy workers shine. For instance, I never realized my abandonment issues and deep fear of losing my parents traced back to witnessing my parents' murder as a child in a past life, which Eva identified in a session before removing large layers of that trauma imprint. And before you think that that's woo-woo or that was placebo and I just made that up, I could literally feel the trauma coming up and out of my system, and I felt lighter and lighter. The more I did the session, the more I did transmissions from her. We worked on it, and I felt more and more free, and it no longer binds to me. Much later, I found that other abandonment issues were embedded in my lower chakra system, just off to the left of my lower abdomen. Valentina, during our first Zoom session ever, focused directly on that area, And as I felt energy streaming in through my crown chakra and flowing down to my sacral chakra, it was like energetic surgery. I could feel the trauma literally being extracted and rising up and out of my body, like the claw in one of those arcade games that grabs the toy prize. Literally, again, literally, I felt that. Except the prize wasn't some cheap trinket. It was a serious step closer to freedom from that fear. Holy shit. I cannot believe that just happened. I told her immediately after it was removed. Yeah, that was a big one. She laughed. Now invite love and gratitude into that space during integration. In a few days, you start to feel a lot lighter. She was absolutely right. That magnitude of the fear lessened, saving me from further needless suffering and probably a lifetime of trying to figure out why I was so messed up about abandonment. Come to find out, the problem was never from this lifetime to begin with.